In the last session, I offered some classical arguments for God's existence. We talked about the cosmological argument for God's existence. We briefly talked about the argument from design and the moral argument for God's existence. In this session, I want to give a little bit of a different argument for God's existence. I want to build this argument actually on a particular book of the Bible. I believe that the book of Ecclesiastes in the Old Testament is an apologetics book. I believe it's an apologetics book because the whole book is a prolonged argument concluding in the final chapter, a prolonged argument arguing not just for God's existence, it assumes God's existence, but really arguing for the fullness and the completeness of following God with your life. Many of us know the story of Ecclesiastes. It was written by Solomon, King Solomon, as an old man reflecting back on his life. And of course, Solomon in his day, Solomon was one of the wealthiest, most powerful, wisest men who ever lived. And it says all throughout the book, especially if you go back and read Ecclesiastes 2, he says, I denied myself nothing. I was in a position where I had the ability to, whatever I wanted, I could get it. If I wanted pleasure, I could get it. If I wanted to build a palace, I could build a bigger palace than anyone else. If I wanted entertainment, if I wanted women, if I wanted wisdom and learning, I could get whatever my heart desired. And he says, I denied myself nothing. Whatever I wanted, I gave it to myself. But he concludes, again, as an old man looking back on his life, he concludes, what was it all worth? What did it all mean? And he uses this word about 30 times throughout the book of Ecclesiastes to describe this life of denying himself nothing. He uses the word Hebel in Hebrew. Hebel. It's translated in different ways. Older translations might use the word vanity. Newer translations use the word meaningless. It was all meaningless. All of it. It was all Hebel. It was what he calls a chasing after the wind. The way that I like to describe or define Hebel, what that word actually means, I like to point to cotton candy. Hebel is like cotton candy. So you think about cotton candy. Cotton candy, it's big, it's fluffy, it's colorful, it's very, very seductive, especially to young children. And you see this big, fluffy ball of cotton candy, and you think, oh, that's really going to satisfy me. That's going to be awesome. It's going to be so good. And your kids are begging for it. And so they're whining for it. And so just to pacify them, you put your $4 down, you buy the cotton candy. And what happens as soon as you put cotton candy in your mouth? Well, what happens is it evaporates. It disappears. And that's really what Hebel amounts to. Hebel is like cotton candy. You see something in the world and you think, oh man, that's really going to satisfy me. That's really going to make me happy. If I just have this one thing, if I could just pursue that one goal, if I could just accomplish that one goal, if I just can attain these things for my life, then I'll be happy. Maybe then I'll be happy. And we take it in and we consume it, and it almost as soon as it passes our lips, it evaporates. It's gone. So much of advertising is built on this notion of Hebel. Every year a new cell phone comes out, and every year we're told, if you just buy this new phone, your life will be incrementally happier. You'll be incrementally more satisfied than you were before with your old phone. And it's all designed to make you question whether or not you're truly satisfied, question whether or not you're truly whole. And the way to become whole is by purchasing this thing. And so you do it, you plop down the money, you purchase this thing, you take it in, and for a moment, it does satisfy. For a moment, it actually does taste good. But then eventually it just evaporates and it leaves us empty. It leaves us wanting more. And Solomon, hundreds, thousands of years ago, Solomon was writing to us today and saying, listen, I've been down that road. I've been down that road where I denied myself nothing. I pursued all of these things. I pursued wealth and power and privilege and all these things. I took it in, but it was like cotton candy. It was all, in the end, it was Hebel. And so he says in chapter 3 of the book of Ecclesiastes, he says, I have seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. So what Solomon seems to be hinting at here is that we all are designed by God with a longing for eternity, for a longing for meaning, something that goes beyond this world. It's been placed into us. It's been hardwired into us by God. But yet the way that we pursue that, meaning is so often with the things of this world. And the things of this world are never capable of satisfying the eternity that God has placed in our hearts. The things of this world, the temporal things of this world, are never capable of giving us that true meaning. So we were designed to operate in a certain way, but yet the things of this world can't satisfy that desire. And so that's why he concludes towards the end of the book in chapter 12, he says, remember your Creator in the days of your youth. Here he is as an old man writing to us through the years. And he says, the thing that I've learned, the most important lesson that I've learned throughout this life of pursuing Hebel is that we need to remember our Creator, not when we're old, but remember our Creator in the days of our youth, in the days of our vigor. In the same chapter, Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13, he says, here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the full duty of all mankind. Ecclesiastes reminds us that human beings have this inexhaustible desire for meaning. Solomon's desire for meaning was not the problem. We all have this inexhaustible desire for meaning. The problem that Solomon has, and the problem that you and I have, is that we try to satisfy this meaning in the wrong place and with the wrong things. There are several questions that every person asks themselves in order to arrive at some sort of meaning or purpose for their life. Everyone asks some version of these questions. Questions like, who am I? What's my identity in this world? Questions like, do I matter? Does my life have purpose? Questions like, why am I here? Why am I here? Questions like, what's wrong with the world and how can it be fixed? And here's my point. Every single person, doesn't matter Christian, non-Christian, believer, atheist, doesn't matter. Every single person is asking these really deep, really difficult questions about meaning, questions about purpose, questions about identity. And we're all searching out answers in different ways and in different places. The nature and the necessity of the questions themselves points not only to the existence of God, but also points to a personal creator God, a God who designed us for meaning. Did you hear what I said there? In the previous session, I said that arguments for God's existence start with things that are readily observable by all people. This argument for God's existence is doing the same thing. What we observe in all people is this insatiable desire for meaning, for purpose in their lives. And again, it doesn't matter. Religious, irreligious, everyone has this insatiable desire for purpose. And what I'm asking is simply this: where does that desire come from? The best explanation of that desire is that we were created by God, by a transcendent God, to long for him and to be satisfied in him. But in our rebellion against God, we try to satisfy that desire in other places. St. Augustine said this: you have made us for you, talking of God. You have made us for you, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. You have made us for you, and our heart is restless until it finds its rest in you. Blaise Pascal, another Christian thinker, he says, there is this God-shaped vacuum in the heart of every man which cannot be filled by any created thing, but only by God, the Creator, made known through Jesus. Sounds a lot like Ecclesiastes. We have this eternity set in our hearts. We have this God-shaped gap in our hearts, but we try to fill it with all the hebel of this world, and nothing quite satisfies. Nothing quite fills that hole. Here's Pascal writing again. He says, what else does this longing and helplessness proclaim? But that there was once in each person a true happiness, of which all that now remains is the empty print and trace. We try to fill this in vain with everything around us, seeking in things that are not there the help that we cannot find in those that are there. Yet nobody can change things, because this infinite abyss can only be filled with something that is infinite and unchanging. In other words, by God himself. God alone is our true good. We can't fill the eternity that God has placed in our hearts. We can't fill it with the things of this world that do not last and that do not satisfy. We can only be truly satisfied in God. Here's one more quote from Pascal. He says, who would think himself unhappy if he had only one mouth? And who would not if he had only one eye? It has probably never occurred to anyone to be distressed at not having 3 eyes, but those who have none are inconsolable. I think this is a wonderful point. None of us woke up this morning frustrated, agitated by the fact that we only have 2 eyes. None of us woke up this morning frustrated that we don't have 3 eyes. But yet, if we have only one functioning eye, or if unfortunately we have no functioning eyes, this is something that is distressful to us. And so what Pascal is saying is we have this very unnatural longing. We have an unnatural longing. We long for eternity. That's like a person longing for a third eye. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And what he's saying is this longing that doesn't have any other explanation in this world. This longing actually points us to the existence of a creator who wants to have a relationship with us. C.S. Lewis puts it this way. He says, a man's physical hunger does not prove that man will get any bread. He may die of starvation on a raft in the Atlantic. But surely a man's hunger does prove that he comes of a race which repairs its body by eating and inhabits a world where eatable substances exist. In the same way, though I do not believe, I wish I did, that my desire for paradise proves that I shall enjoy it, I think it a pretty good indication that such a thing exists and that some men will. A man may love a woman and not win her, but it would be very odd if the phenomenon called falling in love occurred in a sexless world. So what C.S. Lewis is articulating there is what I call an argument for desire. An argument for desire. It would be very weird to experience hunger in a world where food doesn't exist. And this is what Ecclesiastes is also showing us. We have this hunger for meaning. We have this hunger for purpose. It would be very, very weird, and I think impossible, to live in a world where we have this appetite for meaning if meaning were impossible. If it were impossible to actually have a meaningful life. N.T. Wright, who's a New Testament scholar, he puts it this way, and I found this helpful in the way that I think about this argument for longing. N.T. Wright says that there are what he calls echoes of Eden that live on in each one of us. We long for things which are ultimately unattainable in the world. N.T. Wright lists 4 of these such things. These are longings that all people have. I'm going to write them up here on the board. He says we all long for justice. We all long for things to be made right. All people long for justice. We also long for what he calls spirituality. Now, spirituality is another way of thinking about that is that spirituality is the longing for transcendence, the longing for an experience that goes beyond this world. We all long for spiritual experiences. He also talks about community. We long for relationships, deep, abiding relationships. We long for community. And then fourthly, we long for beauty. And here's his observation. All people have these longings. There are no exceptions. All people long for justice. All people long for some sort of spiritual experience, community, beauty. We all long for these things. We all work for these things. But in working for these things, what we find is we always fall short. We fall short in our dream of justice. We fall short in our pursuit of beauty. Our communities are racked by division, separation, death. Community is always broken. Our longing for spirituality is always frustrated by the experiences of our ordinary day-to-day life. But we still long for these things. We still work for these things. And N.T. Wright, I think, makes a brilliant point that in these longings, connecting it back with Ecclesiastes, these longings are pointing us towards this insatiable desire for meaning that we try to fill up with all the hebel of this world, but can only ultimately be filled up with God. And I think it's not a standard argument for God's existence, but I think it's a powerful argument for God's existence because it starts with not things that are necessarily out there in the world, but it starts with the human heart, something that all of us have experienced. And it just asks the question, if we have these longings that cannot be satisfied or filled by anything in this world, then maybe what that means is we were created for something else. We were created for something bigger, and we were created by someone who wants to know us and love us and provide us with true meaning in our lives.